started with a joke. A joke I made to myself alone in my flat in London. I had just gotten back from a solo hiking trip in California. I'd always wanted to hike in the American wilderness, and I finally did it. Yosemite, Sequoia, a few remote trails outside the popular parks. It was stunning, massive, quiet in a way you don't get here in England. But while I was there, mountain lions were always on my mind. I never saw one, just warning signs on trailheads and posts online, mostly from other hikers saying, "If you see one, you're already being hunted." That line stuck with me. I repeated it in my head while I walked alone. Back in London, I was unpacking and trying to shake the jet lag. The flat felt small after the wide trails and forests, too quiet in a different way. I joked to myself while brushing my teeth, looking into the mirror, thinking, I can't see a mountain lion here, so there clearly is one, and it's biding its time to kill me. It made me smirk. It felt stupid but oddly satisfying to say, like daring the silence in my flat to answer back. But that joke lingered longer than I expected. The next night I made it again, out loud. This time the humor wasn't as sharp. I was halfway through cleaning the kitchen when the thought returned. I stood there, sponge in hand, and just paused. What if something was here? I shook my head and turned back to the sink. A few days passed. Nothing happened, obviously. I went back to work. I took the tube. I ate lunch in the park. Life returned to normal. But every evening, I started to hear things. Subtle shifts. Not city sounds outside, these came from inside the flat. Scrapes on the wall. Light thumps like something heavy settling its weight. Once I heard what sounded like breathing behind the bathroom door. I told myself it was the plumbing. The pipes in this old place groaned all the time. Then came the smell. It was faint, but it lingered. Musky, like a dirty zoo enclosure. I cleaned every inch of the flat thinking maybe I left food out or something had gone bad. But I couldn't find the source. I opened windows, sprayed cleaner, burned candles. The smell stayed, worse at night, like something hiding, sweating. I started sleeping with the hallway light on. I told myself it was just leftover nerves from hiking alone. But deep down, it didn't feel like nerves. It felt like knowledge, not belief. I knew something was here. I started checking the closets every evening. Under the bed, behind the curtains. Always nothing, yet the feeling stayed. I began to lose sleep. My body stayed tense through the night, expecting a sound, a movement. I kept my bedroom door shut. Felt like a barrier. Then one morning, I found claw marks on the inside of the front door. Deep, uneven, running vertical in a messy pattern. My stomach dropped. I stared at them for a long time, tried to reason it out. Maybe I scratched it with something while bringing in my backpack. Maybe the door was already damaged and I never noticed. I took a photo. I stared at it later that day on the tube, zooming in, out, over and over. I even ran my fingernail along the marks that evening. They were fresh. You could still see the wood dust. And they were too deep for anything I owned to make. I didn't own a pet. No visitors. No parties. The air in the flat felt wrong. Thicker, like something was pressing down on it. I felt watched in my own home. Not just watched, studied, every move tracked. I started using the bathroom at work instead of at home. I didn't like closing the door anymore. I kept imagining turning around and something being there. Waiting. I ate out more often. Spent hours at cafes until closing. I just didn't want to be alone in the flat. But I couldn't say anything to friends or coworkers. What would I say? That I think a mountain lion followed me from California to London and now lives in my walls? I considered seeing someone, a therapist. Maybe this was just a mental spiral, a fear that bloomed into obsession. But the more I considered that, the more things physically happened. One night, I woke up to find the window in the spare room open. I never opened that window. It takes force to unlatch. The cold air had flooded the hallway. I shut it, locked it, and pushed a chair under the handle. 3 nights later, I found a long, pale animal hair in the bathtub, almost white, coarse, stuck to the edge where the curtain hangs. I sat on the floor, staring at it. I didn't move it for over an hour. I just kept looking. Eventually, I flushed it, but my hands shook. I stopped sleeping. I sat up at night reading articles about mountain lions, how they behave, what signs they leave, how they kill. They like to ambush. They stalk for days. They wait. They're quiet, smart. They go for the neck. One night, I locked myself in my room and pushed the dresser in front of the door. I stayed awake until morning. My ears strained to hear over the sound of my own heartbeat. Once, around 3 a.m., I heard a long, low growl. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. Just steady, like a warning. In the morning, nothing. No signs. Just the dresser slightly nudged forward, like something had pushed against the door. I started looking for a new flat the next day. I moved out within 2 weeks. Didn't wait for the lease to end. Left furniture behind. Told the landlord I had to leave for family reasons. I didn't care about the deposit. I just needed out. I found a tiny place in Camden. Nothing fancy, just small and secure. The first few nights there, I felt lighter. I slept. No noises, no smells, no marks. Then, 2 days ago, I found another hair on the windowsill. Same color, same coarse texture. Yesterday morning, I woke up and the kitchen tap was running. I never leave it like that. Last night, I locked all the doors, set up a motion detector app on my phone, and sat in bed until sunrise. The app went off once, around 4:47 a.m. living room. I walked out there this morning. Claw marks on the inside of the window frame. I don't know how. I don't know what it wants. I don't understand how it followed me here or why. It's not a ghost, not a shadow. It's flesh, real. It waits. It hides. It knows I can't prove it to anyone. And it knows the city isn't made for something like it, which is why it's so perfect for it to hide in. I've bought a camera. I've placed it in the hallway. Tonight, I'll keep every light on. I won't sleep. And if it shows itself, I'll be ready to run. Because I finally understand the joke I made. I can't see a mountain lion in my flat, which means there is one, and it's biding its time to kill me. It was around this time last year, mid-September, when the nights had finally started to cool down enough to make hiking in the desert tolerable again. The idea had come up between a few of us after dinner, a night hike with UV lights to spot scorpions. It's a common desert pastime, especially if you're the kind of person who enjoys wildlife and doesn't mind a little adrenaline. There were 3 of us, me, Jeff, and Molly had brought her little dog, some kind of terrier mix, no bigger than a loaf of bread. I thought it was a bit careless at first, bringing a dog out that late, but I kept the thought to myself. We started the hike a little after 9 p.m., armed with headlamps and UV flashlights. The trail was narrow and dry, flanked by saguaros and low, scraggly bushes. Even with our lights, the surroundings felt like a blanket of black velvet dotted with thorns. We hadn't been walking long before we started spotting them. Small scorpions glowing electric blue under the UV light, clinging to rocks or shuffling across the dirt. For a while, it was just fun. We'd stop to inspect some glowing bug, watch it scurry back under a rock, laugh, and move on. I was taking caboose, the last position in line, because I tend to be more aware of what's behind me. It's a habit I picked up from hiking alone too many times. I like to know what's coming, or at least be able to guess. It was maybe an hour in when I first saw something move. Not a scorpion, not a coyote, something big. I caught it in the edge of my headlamp, just the shape of something dropping down off the side of the trail and into the scrub. It had a certain weight to it, a way of moving that wasn't like anything small. The light caught a glimpse of the tail, long and thick, and my stomach sank. I stopped walking and just stared into the brush. Everything in me said mountain lion. I looked at the others, both of them still walking a few paces ahead, chatting quietly, the little dog prancing beside Molly like it was totally safe out here. I swallowed the warning rising in my throat. I didn't want to spook anyone without proof. But I slowed down, scanned the edge of the trail more carefully, and kept my hand closer to my belt knife. Not that it would have helped much against a panther. A few minutes later, I saw it again, this time clearer. The curve of its back and the way it slinked forward, moving parallel to us through the brush but just far enough in the darkness to stay hidden. I stopped again and called the others to slow down. I raised my light and swept it over the scrub. It was hard convincing them at first. Jeff looked back and shrugged. Molly looked down at her dog, who wasn't barking or growling or doing anything out of the ordinary. But then Jeff froze and said, "Wait," and pointed. I followed his gaze. My light had landed right on the creature's back. You could see the sleek, tan fur, the slope of the spine, and the long, thick tail. It stood completely still, just watching us. It had been there, trailing us for who knows how long. We grouped together tight, and I took the back again, this time walking in reverse so I could keep eyes on it. The UV light was off now. All we used were headlamps. Every few steps, I'd sweep the beam across the brush behind us, and more often than not, I caught a glimpse of it. A tail curling behind a rock, a shoulder dipping below a bush, glowing eyes reflecting for half a second before disappearing again. We were less than a quarter mile from the parking lot, but it felt like a marathon. The air had that quiet tension to it, like before a lightning strike. We didn't talk. We didn't run. We just kept walking tight and slow. My mouth was dry, my legs shaky. My brain played out all the outcomes, what would happen if it charged, if it went for the dog, if we panicked and someone fell. I imagined the claws, the teeth, the weight of it slamming into one of us. When we reached the first sign that civilization was near, a reflective trail marker nailed to a wooden post, I felt a wave of relief, but I didn't let my guard down. The lion hadn't run, hadn't made a sound. It just stalked us, calmly and patiently, as if waiting for a mistake. At the lot, there was only one car, a white SUV, parked in the corner. Its engine wasn't running, but we could see the faint glow of someone's phone screen inside. Jeff knocked on the window. I didn't hear what was said, didn't care. I was focused on the side trail to our right where the lion had last vanished. The guy in the car turned on his engine and swung the headlights around toward the trail. There it was, full body, clear as day. A mountain lion, just 20 feet off the trail, frozen in the light like a statue. Big, muscular, head low, eyes narrowed. It looked directly at us, and for a few seconds nobody moved. Then it turned and ran. Silent, no sound, no rustle. Just gone, like a shadow melting back into the scrub. We didn't talk much after that. Just piled into our car and drove. Nobody even really wanted to laugh about it. It had felt too real, too close, like something from a dream, but not the kind you forget. The kind that sticks to your skin. Since that night, we haven't done many scorpion hunts. When we do go out at night, we're stricter, better gear, tighter formations, no dogs. I still hike, I still get outside, but it's different now. There's always a small part of me that thinks about the brush just outside my headlamp's beam, about the things that move without sound, about how we're not always the ones doing the watching. I didn't stop hiking, but now I always check behind me, and I never assume the darkness is empty. It was just before sunrise in Hawaii, and I had the whole trail to myself. The sky was still dim, that soft kind of early morning gray when the sun hasn't come up yet, but the world is slowly waking. I had planned this hike for weeks, mostly to beat the heat, but also to avoid the tourists who packed the trails later in the day. I parked my rental car near the trailhead and stepped out into the cool, humid air. It was quiet, just the sound of the occasional bird, rustling leaves, and the soft crunch of gravel under my hiking boots. I had my small day pack on, water bottle filled, protein bar tucked in the side pocket, and my headlamp strapped to my forehead. I was ready. I took a few deep breaths, just taking in the peacefulness. It was the kind of moment that made hiking worth it. The solitude, the stillness, the calm before a long, steady climb. About 5 minutes into the walk, my stomach began to churn. At first, I ignored it. Sometimes it did that. I figured it was just adjusting to the movement and the early wake-up call. I kept walking, picking up a decent pace as the incline began to pick up. But within another few minutes, the gurgling got worse. It wasn't the kind of noise you could pass off. It was the kind that made you freeze and mentally calculate the nearest bathroom. That's when I remembered seeing a blue porta-potty at the trailhead parking lot, tucked just off to the side. I stood still for a second, debated if I could hold it, then felt another wave ripple through my gut. No, this wasn't negotiable. I turned around, half walking, half speed shuffling back the way I came, trying to keep everything clenched and controlled. When I reached the porta potty, it was that typical plastic box, weathered but upright. I flicked my headlamp on and opened the door slowly. Inside, it looked bearable, about what you'd expect. Dim, kind of musty, but not the worst I'd seen. I stepped in, turned around, and shut the door. Now, using a porta potty before the sun comes up is a different kind of experience. The air is cooler inside, and without the daylight, your headlamp becomes your only guide. I did what I had to do as quickly as I could, wanting to get back on the trail before anyone else arrived. I sat there in silence, the occasional creak of plastic around me, the distant sound of leaves rustling outside. Just when I reached for the toilet paper, I tilted my headlamp down to find it. That's when I saw it. A massive banana spider, at least 5 inches across, legs splayed out wide. It was just hanging out in the upper corner by the roll of toilet paper, like it owned the place. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe it was dead. But nope. Its legs shifted slightly, like it had just noticed the light. I felt a flash of panic in my chest, but I tried to stay calm. I didn't want to spook it. Banana spiders aren't venomous to humans, I reminded myself, but they're still big enough to cause sheer psychological damage. I figured I could just slowly reach for the paper, not make any sudden movements, and everything would be fine. Wrong. As soon as my hand moved within a few inches of the roll, my headlamp beam hit the spider directly. It didn't like that. It started moving fast. At first, it ran in circles, scuttling across the corner of the porta potty like it was glitching out. I immediately retracted my hand, pressed my back against the wall, eyes wide. The spider kept darting, legs tapping on plastic, moving from corner to corner like it had gone full panic mode. Then it dropped. I don't even know how, but in the blink of an eye, it was no longer on the wall. It had fallen or leapt onto the floor, right in front of me. I tensed up, still sitting, still exposed, and watched it scurry around in a frenzy. My heart was pounding. Sweat started to beat up along my forehead. And then it climbed. It crawled toward me onto my ankle, and then inside my underwear that was still around my thighs. I nearly blacked out. I sat there in full-body freeze mode, the weight of it barely noticeable, but the horror of it unmistakable. It was between my legs, somewhere in the folds of fabric, and I had no idea what to do. I didn't move at first. I thought maybe if I stayed still, it would crawl back out. But nope. It started moving again, this time up my leg. I let out a strangled gasp, the kind that gets stuck in your throat, and that's when all the restraint I had went out the window. I shot up off the seat like I'd been electrocuted, pushed the porta potty door open with my shoulder, and stumbled outside, screaming, yelling, half running with my pants around my ankles. I didn't care. I didn't care who was around. My only goal was to get the spider off me. I ran in jagged circles in the dirt, kicking, swatting, flailing. I could feel it moving under the waistband now, and I just kept yelling. I clawed at the fabric, smacking my legs, doing whatever I could without fully falling over. I probably looked like a lunatic, and honestly, I was one in that moment. Eventually, after what felt like a full minute of chaos, the sensation stopped. I didn't see it fall. I didn't see it run away. I just knew it was gone, vanished. I was left standing there in the early dawn light, shirt twisted, pants still not fully up, breathing like I just sprinted up the mountain. The spider had disappeared into the morning mist, just like my dignity. I stood there for a few more seconds, panting, body shaking, staring at the tree line like I expected it to come back. I slowly pulled up my pants, checked every inch of myself twice, and limped over to the driver's side of my car. I sat down in the front seat, door still open, just trying to get my heart rate down. I didn't go on the hike. I waited in the car for almost half an hour before I felt calm enough to drive. Even then, I kept glancing at my legs, half expecting it to show up again. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still on me somewhere. I stopped at a gas station 10 minutes down the road and did a full body inspection in the bathroom. Nothing. It was gone. But the paranoia stuck around. The rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The size of that thing, how fast it moved, the randomness of it all. It felt like one of those weird nature horror stories you read about but never think will happen to you. It did. I ended up skipping all my other planned hikes for the trip. I stayed on beaches, ate food near the coast, did anything that didn't involve a trail or a porta potty. The thought of stepping into another one of those plastic boxes made my skin crawl. I wasn't even afraid of spiders before this. Now I flinch when I see a shadow move on the wall. I flew back home a few days later and didn't tell anyone about it at first. Not because I was embarrassed, though to be fair, it wasn't my proudest moment, but because I needed time to process it. Time to accept that I'd been bested by a spider in a very vulnerable moment. Eventually, I told a couple friends, and they laughed until they cried. I laughed too, sort of. But even now, months later, the memory is still clear. That spider, that porta potty, the panic. It's all burned into my brain. And next time I go hiking, if there is a next time, I'll be carrying my own toilet paper and checking every corner of every structure before I sit down. Because I've learned one thing for sure. Nature doesn't care about your schedule, your pride, or your pants. And in Hawaii, even a toilet break can turn into a full-blown nightmare. I always wanted to see Hawaii. I had this list, of places I wanted to hike before I turned 40. Volcanoes, rainforests, cliffs over the ocean, all that. Hawaii seemed like a paradise. It was supposed to be all about warm breezes, green cliffs, flowers in the air. Not this. I flew into Hilo on a weekday morning, picked up a rental car, and drove straight to the east side of the Big Island. I didn't have a solid plan, just a few trails I'd read about, and a couple marked on an old topographic map. The island was quiet out there. Not many tourists, just a few locals who looked at me like they knew something I didn't. I chalked it up to being an outsider. That first night, I stayed at a cheap hostel, then got up before dawn and drove down this narrow road through thick jungle. No street lights, no signs. I parked off to the side where the trees started to open up a little, packed my bag, and headed out. The trail wasn't really marked. It looked like an old hunting path, half overgrown, but I had GPS and figured I could find my way back. The air was thick and wet, and even that early the heat was heavy. Birds called from every direction. At first, I was loving it. The green was so deep it didn't even look real. Vines hung from the trees. The ground was covered in layers of ferns and moss, and everything felt alive. But the deeper I got, the quieter it became. I was hiking toward an old lava tube I'd read about online. Some people said it was an amazing off-the-grid find. No tourists, no signs, just pure nature. I had to hike about 5 or 6 miles in to reach it, depending on which turns I took. I figured I'd be in and out before late afternoon. About 3 hours in, I noticed the trail had shifted. Like, the dirt under my boots didn't match what I had walked through earlier. It got darker, damper. The trees changed. I thought maybe I had taken a wrong turn, but I double-checked my GPS and it showed I was still on track. That's when I noticed the silence. No birds, no bugs, just my own breathing and the rustle of my boots through leaves. I stopped to take a break, sat on a fallen log, drank water. I remember looking around and realizing I hadn't seen any sign of other people. No footprints, no old wrappers, no trail markers, nothing. Just thick forest pressing in on all sides. It was like the jungle swallowed up anything that came through. I got up to keep moving, and not even 10 minutes later, I felt it. Something watching me. I know how that sounds, but I don't mean in a movie way. I mean that feeling when you're walking down a sidewalk alone and suddenly you just know someone's behind you. It was that, but it didn't go away. Every few feet I turned around, trying to catch something out of the corner of my eye. I didn't see anything at first. Then I noticed the trees to my left. One of them had long scratches down the bark, fresh ones. 3 deep gouges, like something with claws had raked down it. I leaned in close and they weren't old. The bark was still weeping sap. It looked recent. I told myself it was a boar or maybe a wild dog, but that didn't sit right with me. The deeper I went, the more signs I started seeing. Not obvious ones, just enough to mess with me. Twigs broken just above eye level. Muddy spots with deep prints that didn't look like anything I could identify. Not human, not animal, just shapes. like someone had stepped in and out without walking anywhere. I pressed on. I should have turned back, but I was too far in and I wanted to see that lava tube. Stupid reason to keep going, but I did. About an hour later, I found it. The entrance was small, half covered by vines. If I didn't have the GPS marker, I would have missed it completely. I crouched and slipped in, turning on my headlamp. It smelled damp, like wet rocks and mold. I moved slowly, careful not to lose my footing. Inside, the air was cooler. The tunnel stretched about 50 feet before opening up into a wide chamber. The ceiling was low, maybe 6 feet, and the walls looked slick. I was about to step in when my light caught something on the ground. Bones. Not a lot, just a few, scattered like they'd been tossed. Small ones, maybe bird, maybe rat. I backed up. Then I heard it. A sound from deeper in the tube. Not an echo, not water. Something else. A dry scraping sound. Slow. Deliberate. I froze. Every part of me was telling me to move, but I couldn't. I just stood there listening. Came again, louder. Closer. Like claws on stone. That broke the spell. I turned and scrambled out, banging my knee hard on the rocks. I didn't care. I didn't even look back. I just ran. I didn't follow the GPS anymore. I just moved in the direction I thought the road was. Branches tore at my arms, my face. I lost my hat, then my water bottle. I didn't stop. Somewhere along the way, I tripped. Full body slam into the mud. When I got up, I heard the sound again. Behind me. That same dry scrape, followed by silence. I don't know if it was following me or if I was just imagining it, but it was there. I finally hit a slope I recognized, one I had climbed earlier in the day. It led down to the road. I almost cried. I barreled through the last half mile like a wild animal. When I burst out onto the gravel where my car was parked, I didn't even stop to check myself. I jumped in and locked the doors, just sat there breathing. I didn't look back into the trees. I didn't want to see anything. I drove straight to the airport the next morning and rebooked my flight. I didn't even stay to check out the beaches or the volcano parks. I just left. Back home, people asked how Hawaii was. I told them it wasn't for me. I deleted all the hiking apps from my phone, took the maps down, sold my gear. Hiking used to be my way of getting peace, of clearing my head. But now when I think of it, I just remember that dark jungle, the silence, and that scraping sound inside the tube. And every once in a while, I still dream about it. Not about what I saw, but what I didn't. The thing that was watching me. The thing that was waiting. I'm never going back to Hawaii. Not even close. I scratched it off the list, and I'm never adding it back. I never used to think much about spiders. I mean, sure, they weren't my favorite, but I didn't go out of my way to kill them either. I thought of them as part of the landscape, part of the outdoors, part of hiking, which I loved. But that changed after a trip to Florida. I've hiked all over, but that one weekend in Florida, walking through the woods near a horse show outside Ocala, made me question whether I'd ever go into the woods again. It started out as a way to kill time. My younger cousin was competing in a 3-day horse event at a showground, and I figured while she and the family were busy with grooming and warming up and all the events, I could sneak away and explore some of the local trails. I brought my gear for a short-day hike. I knew the area was swampy in places, but this trail I found on an old hiking forum promised to skirt the wetter ground and loop through a slightly raised hammock forest, through pine flatwoods and sandy scrub. The entrance wasn't far from the horse park, maybe 15 minutes by car. I parked along a sandy pull-off and stepped out into thick morning heat. It was only about 8 a.m., but the air already felt heavy, like walking through bathwater. I slapped on bug spray, tightened my boots, and set off down the narrow footpath. It was quiet, not silent, just dense. Bugs buzzing, tree frogs chirping, the distant hum of what sounded like a generator or maybe a small plane. I stepped carefully over palmetto roots and pushed through underbrush. At first, it was the usual Florida terrain. Flat, packed dirt and soft sand, with towering pines and scrubby oaks twisting above. The trail had clearly been used before, but not recently. There were no markers, just the bare path winding through the woods. About 10 minutes in, I hit the first web. It was almost invisible, I walked straight into it, caught the sticky silk across my face, and instinctively flailed. I clawed at my cheeks and wiped my forehead with the sleeve of my shirt. My hat saved me from most of it, but still gross. I stopped, tried to regroup, and told myself it was just one. No big deal. I walked on, slower this time, eyes forward. A few minutes later, another web. I caught sight of it just in time. It was stretched between two shrubs like a sheet of lace, but thicker. I ducked under it. Then another a few feet later. This one higher between two young pines. I stepped to the side to avoid it and nearly tripped over a root. It was like navigating an obstacle course. What got to me wasn't just the number of webs, though that was bad enough. It was the spiders themselves. These weren't tiny things. They were big-bodied, long-legged, and colorful. Mostly orb weavers, I think, those big banana spiders that set up shop across trails. Their legs were spindly and long, with bands of yellow and black. Their bodies looked almost shiny. Everywhere I turned, one was sitting in the center of a web, just waiting. They didn't move. They didn't need to. I felt like I was being watched, like each one knew I was there and was daring me to step too close. I thought about turning around, but I told myself it had to get better. Maybe the stretch was bad because of the season or the time of day. Maybe if I pushed through a little further, I'd hit open ground or higher terrain. So I kept going. The trail narrowed. The overgrowth got thicker. I ducked and weaved and swatted at invisible threads. By now, I was covered in silk. It clung to my arms, my neck, the back of my legs. I could feel it sticking to my backpack straps and my water bottle. I stopped trying to remove it. It was pointless. About an hour in, I came to a small clearing. The air felt different here, still hot, but stagnant. The kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. The ground was a little lower, and I could see muddy water pooled in shallow spots between roots. I thought about turning around again, but I didn't want to go back through all those webs. I checked my GPS. There was a loop. I was about halfway through. If I kept going, I'd hit a service road in about 2 miles that would lead back to the car. I figured that was better than retracing my steps, so I pushed on. That was when I realized the spiders weren't just in the trees. They were on the ground, in the bushes, in the grass. I almost stepped on one. It darted back under a dead palmetto frond before my boot landed, big as my palm. Hairy, not the shiny kind, but dark, rough, fast. Then another one scuttled up a tree as I passed. I started breathing faster. My skin crawled. I couldn't tell if I had spiders on me or if my nerves were just shot. My hands shook. I moved faster. The trail curved and dipped again. Webs, more webs, thicker now, like nets. Some of them shimmered in the light, strong enough to catch leaves. I saw one with a lizard wrapped up in the middle, just hanging there, twitching slightly. I tried not to panic, but every step made it harder. My legs itched. I didn't know if it was bites or sweat or my brain short-circuiting. I wiped my face and felt a thick strand across my mouth. I gagged, spit, rinsed with the last of my water. I kept moving. The trail faded. My GPS showed I was still heading the right way, but the path was overgrown now. I had to step over logs, push aside branches. Every time I did, more webs. I stopped caring if they broke. I barreled through them, arms up, trying to shield my face. Then the buzzing started. Not mosquitoes, not flies, a deep, low hum. At first I thought it was in my ears, but it got louder as I walked. I turned a corner and saw it. Something rotting. An animal. Maybe a boar. Maybe a dog. Hard to tell. Flies everywhere. Webs all around it. Big ones. Some of the spiders were feeding. I ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I ran straight, cutting through brush, smashing through webs, spiders be damned. My arms bled from scratches. My face stung. My clothes were soaked with sweat and dirt. Eventually, I saw the service road. Just a narrow strip of gravel, but it looked like heaven. I stumbled out of the woods and fell to my knees. I caught my breath, then stood and followed it until I reached my car. I didn't even clean up. I threw my pack in the back and drove straight back to the showground. My cousin was finishing her event. Everyone asked where I'd gone. I said I'd gotten lost. That night, back at the hotel, I found spider silk in my hair. I must have washed 3 times. I still didn't feel clean. Since then, I haven't gone hiking in Florida. Haven't gone hiking much at all, really. I still feel that silk sometimes. Still check behind me when I walk through trees. Still look for the glint of a web in the sun. I scratched Florida off my hiking list. Charleston too. I don't care how pretty the trails are or what people say. Some places are better left alone. I can't see a spider anymore without feeling it on my skin. I think I'll stick to the desert for now. No webs out there. No shadows waiting in the branches.